Well, many of you know that during the pandemic, I led several weekly online centering prayer sessions for all of you, in which I joined all of you virtually from the meditation room in my home. And if you joined us online for one or more of those sessions, you probably noticed that I have this beautiful painting hanging above my meditation altar at home. I brought it in for you today to show it to all of you. This beautiful painting is called Walking on Water, and it is by the artist Julius von Cleaver. And as you can see, it depicts the story of Jesus walking on the water. And I have this on such prominent display in the room where I pray because it is a reminder for me that when I'm going through storms in my life, that the presence of the Christ walks with me. Because like many of you, when I go to prayer during times in my life where my boat is being rocked, where I'm going through rough waters in life, I'm experiencing some turbulence. And in the silence, I remind myself that the presence of the Christ is with me. And in the silence, I just allow that presence and that power to wash over me and to bring me to a place of stillness and peace. Now, most of you are very familiar with this story from the Gospels. The apostles are in a boat. You can kind of see it here. The boat is being swamped in the storm. And they look out and they see Jesus walking to them on the water. And if you remember, Jesus not only stills the water, but he actually gets Peter to come out of the boat and to also walk on the water. You know, we forget that sometimes. We think Jesus is the only one that demonstrated miracles, but Peter walked on the water too. And if you remember, Jesus said to all of us, "Everything I've done, you can do." And he added, "These things and greater." Now, the story that we heard from this morning's lectionary is not the one where Jesus walks on the water, but it's very similar. As we just heard, the disciples are in a boat, they're in a storm, but this time, Jesus is with them in the boat. But notice, even though they're panicked and afraid, Jesus is fast asleep. Storm's not bothering him at all. But when they awaken him, he says, "Peace, be still," and everything is calmed. Now, these are just two of the many storm stories in the Bible. We heard others today, too, from the lectionary. Our call to worship, Psalm 107, the reading from the Old Testament, from Job, which Lynn just read for us, are also about storms, and there are so many others. I'm sure you can think of some others. Sadly, though, most of us who grew up in the Christian church, we were kind of taught that storm stories meant that God was angry with us, that God sends storms to punish people. It was God's wrath. And that's continued. You know, in recent years, we hear from several prominent evangelical pastors who, whenever there's like the latest hurricane or the latest tsunami or the latest earthquake, they say God sent it because of gay marriage and because of abortion. And of course, all of that is ridiculous. God is not an old man up in the clouds that gets angry with us and sends storms to punish us. We have got to get rid of that idea of this angry, vengeful God. Because if you still are fearful of God, you're never going to grow spiritually. One of my favorite spiritual authors of the 20th century was the late Henri Nouwen. And Henri Nouwen said that Jesus came in order to help us overcome our fear of God. And Nouwen said, as long as we're afraid of God, we can never truly love God. As long as we're afraid of God, we can never truly love God. We can't love what we fear. And I don't know why we ever thought that storms meant that God was angry. Because every time you read a storm story in the Bible, it always goes hand in hand with the mention of God is our refuge from the storm, or God is our shelter from the storm. God is our stronghold. Why should we be afraid? That's what it says every time there's a storm. But we see in today's gospel reading, the disciples are afraid. And Jesus says to them, "Why are you afraid? Where is your faith?" And I think of that often. When I go to prayer and I'm worried and fearful, I often hear those words of Jesus. Why are you afraid? Where's your faith? So what we really need to do is remember that these stories are really about us. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about Scripture. I've told you before, the Bible isn't a history book. We're not just reading about a story that happened to Jesus and the disciples in a boat 2,000 years ago. The reason that the Bible is so alive is because Scripture is about us. We could read it at a literal level. You could. But that's like the lowest level of meaning. We are to read these stories symbolically or spiritually. So let's look at this story spiritually. This story is about us, about the times in our lives when our boat's being rocked. Life's going along fine. We're having a beautiful day out at sea. Life is going great. Then all of a sudden, there's a storm in our life. We lose our job. Our spouse says, I'm leaving you. A loved one suddenly dies. And all of a sudden now we're in the storm. We're in the boat. It's being rocked. And we're scared and we're panicked. So what do? Well, we have to do what the disciples did. They woke up Jesus. We, in those moments, have to call upon, we have to summon the presence and the power of the Christ. We have to awaken the Christ presence within us. That's what the story means. So in those moments, we go into that presence and power of the Christ that Jesus said is within us. That's why we get still. Peace, be still. And in the stillness, I allow that presence and power, that light and life to wash over me, to calm me, and to reassure me that all is well. All is well. Now, we hear often that there's a calm before the storm and there's a calm after the storm. But I want to let you know, my friends, that you can experience calm even during the storms in your life. You can. And for me, what's always been helpful is the metaphor of a hurricane. So you think of a hurricane, right? There's so much chaos and things swirling around. But in the center of that storm, there is a still, untouched place. In the eye of the storm, it's totally calm, totally peaceful. There's a lot of stuff swirling around it, and that's true of the storms in our life. There's a lot going on around us, but we can find that center within us where all is calm and all is still. And that's what we were doing in centering prayer when we were doing those sessions together online. We were centering ourselves. We were trying to get to that place of peace. Some people commented that they saw that when I was doing my centering prayer online, that I had a smile on my face. That when I sit there, I've got a little smile. And that is true. And I learned that from the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. I've talked with you before about Yogananda. He was a Hindu Swami who came over from India to the U.S. in the 1920s and taught these spiritual teachings. But what he taught was when you pray and meditate, have a little smile on your face. Because what it does is it helps negate the negative thinking and the worries and the fears, and it helps attune you more fully to that Christ presence that's within our center. So today, for our offertory song, Max Brown is going to sing the song Smile. You know that old Charlie Chaplin song, Smile. And if you think of the words, the lyrics, it says, smile though your heart is breaking. Smile through your sorrows and your fears. Because, my friends, we're all going to go through storms in life. There's no way we can get through this human incarnation without them. They're a part of life's journey. But we have to remember they're temporary. They're just temporary. Storms pass. But if right now you are in the midst of a storm in your life, please remember you are not going through it alone. You have your spiritual family here. We're with you through your journey. And remember, you have within you the presence and the power of the Christ. And that presence and power is your stronghold, your refuge, your shelter from the storm. Namaste.